Hey everybody, Minchuck here with another video from Disney Sorcerer's Arena. Today, gonna talk a little bit about team building. So, I got this on a comment on my last video here that the Onward trio is really good, but I don't have them, or I don't have foul play, I don't have the bucket of soldiers, so I don't know, like, is my team still good? So, this is like a larger problem generally. For most people, we tend to think when we play a game that the top tier characters all have to be on every single team. Now I have a whole video linked up above about using tier lists. Keep in mind that just because a character isn't technically a top tier, it might still be useful. I mean, even bad characters have usefulness. For instance, if you were to look at the downtown villains, which you will need to have essentially 5 at max in order to unlock Zerg. To get Zerg all the way up to 7 stars, you would need to have, a full team, and you'd have to have them all the way at 7 stars. And if you look, like, Demona is good, but she's not necessarily a top tier. Jangles is useful for that, not necessarily a top tier. Facilier is not really a top tier for PvP because his heals don't really help that much when you're not doing, when you're in PvP content, because you're just doing so much damage between each other that, like, healing for 400 isn't really going to stop anything. So Facilier is good for PvE content, for instance, and he's really probably very good for you to invest in for the Zerg event, but he's not necessarily going to be helpful in PvP. So keep in mind that just because a character is technically listed as like B or A tier instead of being S tier, which is the top 4 characters, that's not necessarily saying you can't use those characters ever, and if you're investing in them, then you're stupid. No, it means that you don't have them right now, and you're investing in characters you do have access to. So, for instance, me, I have the Onward trio. Love them, use them all the time. But if you don't have them, there's still plenty of good characters that you do have access to. Shan Yu, still accessible to every single player. I would heavily recommend investing in him, getting him 7 stars, because, number one, speed. I'll have a whole video on speed. Speed's a whole separate thing here, but for the most part, you have to keep in mind that these stats really don't change that much for stars, but change a lot more for tiers, and having stars really just adds health. So what you really want to be focusing on is like, hey, you know what? Shan Yu's the number 1 character. He's easily accessible to me. I'm going to invest in him right now. And then Aladdin is very accessible. I mean, I'm almost going to get him up to 6 stars probably in the next 2 days. Sorcerer Mickey, another easily accessible character. Very, very, very good. And what you're looking at is, hey, Shan Yu has an ability that adds speed to Kingdom, so maybe I should build a couple Kingdom characters in there. Throw some downtown and don't feel bad about it. Like, just because you have Shan Yu doesn't mean you only have to use Kingdom. I only have 2 Kingdom characters in my top team, but it's enough because these 2 will always go before anyone else because they're so much faster with Shan Yu's bonus. But if you have Bo Peep, for instance, if you've invested in Bo Peep, then she also is a great character. She has a great ability. She's very useful, even though she's not necessarily a top tier. She's useful in teams. And so this is just to say, when you're building a team, don't be beholden to this idea that you're never going to have a good team until you have the top tier characters or until you have, like these certain event characters. No, you can have a great team right now. Even if you have invested 0 money into the game, you can still have a fantastic team that is very useful. Syndrome, for instance, for villains, like he's useful. Like, just because he got bumped down a little bit in the tier list doesn't mean he's bad. It just means that other characters are good and their abilities are more useful. So if you're ever concerned about whether or not your team is good or useful, just fight with it a little bit. If you can find out where it's lacking. It's pretty easy to find out. Like, if I were to fight against a team that's stronger than me, I'd probably say, you know what, like, Barley and Ian don't have a lot of health. They die really fast, but I can't get very many more stars on them. I can't invest in them any further. So if I need to, I might think about possibly replacing some characters that just die too fast before they can get off their abilities. Or if I'm running really slow, then I look at the speed on my characters and I'm like, you know what, I need to invest in more speed. When you're building a team, it's a mixture of looking at the stats, looking at the abilities, and knowing where you can invest your resources. So if you're a free-to-play player, have access to none of the event characters because you're not investing a lot of money into it and you're not paying and you don't have these, well then be smart about your investments. Say like, look, like I can get Shan Yu, Aladdin, I can get Mickey, I could get Jack Sparrow, and I could get like Big Bad Wolf, and that's a great team right there because there's a lot of usefulness between these guys. Or you could say, you know what, like I have this is just what I have and this is what I'm working with. So the trick is testing. Don't be afraid. The beauty, this is the best thing that they have, is that you have real-time PvP in the arena. You can go in and you can try out your team makeup against real live people and figure out whether or not that's useful. That's the only reason I figured out that the Bucket of Soldiers was so good, because I went into a PvP with the Bucket of Soldiers instead of Duke and I was like, man, this spell is incredible. Same thing with Foul Play. I was like, I heard that it's good, I saw it in the tier list, but I'm like, but I need to try it out. So you go into the PvP arena, try it out. You don't have to always have your best characters in here. It's not going to hurt you to lose a couple to try to test them out. And it's great because you get to test it against real life people. Now, you might end up fighting people that are either way too strong or way too weak, and you might not get a good test. But even if 1 out of every 5 is a good test of strength, then that's enough for you to really figure out where your team is lacking, where you need to work, what isn't working, what characters you need to swap out on, what characters you need to invest more in. Do not restrict yourself to only relying on what people tell you in the Discord, what you see on tier lists, what the YouTubers are telling you, me included. Don't just say, oh, since I have this team, this is the best team. No. I have a team that's worked, that I've tested, and that I run right now, but maybe in a month, it'll look completely different. And just because you have 4 top tier characters at the same time doesn't mean that they'll always make a great team. Just because you have 4, like, fantastic characters and then 1 that's like and then Shan Yu, who's the best character, and you have 4 very good characters, doesn't mean that's going to be a good team if you don't know how to use them in conjunction with each other. The reason that this team works for me, this team, is because I have speed. Ian and Shan Yu are very fast, and then Shan Yu speeds up Aladdin, so these two go in the first couple turns. And then I have debuffs. These two can land debuffs. These obviously, and then everyone's feeding into Ian, so Ian can get off his Arcane Lightning. And then I have the spells to keep me going. I've tested a lot. I've worked a lot with a lot of different teams. I've messed around and I've gotten to this point. Don't just think that just because top tier characters are there that means you're going to have a great team. You have to test, and this is why this game is better than almost any other game that I've played. It's because you have this sandbox, real-time PvP. You can really test it out. You're not against bots. You're against real person who can make real decisions in that moment, and it really helps you figure out where your team is lacking and where you can work on. I'm not going to try to rant too much longer, but I really want you guys to know that. I really want you to hear it from me, that just because YouTubers and tier lists are telling you to do something doesn't mean it's the best thing for you right now. Test, mess around with it, play around. As you're progressing in the game, you'll get more and more spells, more and more things you can try, and the more you can mess, the more you'll learn for yourself. Figure out for yourself, and it'll mean more to you, and you'll be able to help your guild, you'll be able to help others, and you don't just have to rely on what we say. That's how I've learned. That's how I've learned in every single game I've played. That's how I've gotten to the point where I'm at, and why I'm able to give you guys advice. Hope that makes sense, and hope that's not too long-winded. But I'll have more videos on some specific stats and things you need to be looking out for, and maybe a breakdown of the tier lists to coincide with some of the other people that have posted very, very, very informative videos. With that, guys, I will leave you. I will see you guys in the next video.